We live in a society full of participation trophies, medals, and feel-good programs. But life holds its share of challenges and opportunities to give up when the going gets even a little tough. Steve Gavatorta has experienced his own share of adversity and hard knocks, and now he speaks and writes of it to help so many others overcome adversity. You don't want to miss even a minute of our conversation with plenty of wise input, and especially if feeling overwhelmed or experiencing change. So stay tuned. This podcast is brought to you by DJ Works Media with resources and ideas for you at mid-career or halftime of life. Check out our online courses where we want you to not only start, but finish. Books available in all versions and songs available for immediate download with sheet music and instrumental accompaniment tracks. Our musicals are family-friendly with great music that's memorable and inspiring. Sign up at goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter for weekly updates. Now to our episode. Well, welcome everyone. I'm so excited to have Steve Gavatorta here today with us. I'm excited for your story, first of all. I love to tell the stories of our guests, and you have an amazing one. Our main audience is those at mid-career, halftime of life, and you have really pulled yourself up from some amazing circumstances. And I like our guests to do most of the talking about themselves. Sure. So you speak a lot about adversity. That's what we're talking about today. And why is that so important to you? And does this mainly come from your background and your message come from that?
Yeah, well, you'll probably make an announcement later, but my book is called In Defense of Adversity, Turning Your Toughest Challenges into Your Greatest Success. That's my second book. And thank you, by the way, for the opportunity to be on your show. But, the origin, I had been interested through life, the topic of adversity, because so many instances in my life where I've grown the most was during those times where I faced, overcame, or at least learned valuable lessons from the obstacles I faced, whether they were work-related, whether they were sports-related, or in personal and professional life. That's when I had my greatest growth, and that topic has just interested me for quite some time. The origin of the book and that whole title really comes from, I'm from a small coal mining town in Pennsylvania, and it's very ethnic. I grew up with every ethnic group possible: Italian, Irish, Polish, Greek, African-American, Mexican, everybody. It was a melting pot because of coal mines, steel mills, and things of that nature. Several years back, I was home and I asked my father, I want to see where you grew up. So he drives to this little hilly village, not the prettiest village. It's a lot of old tenement houses. And he was a successful entrepreneur himself. And he points to this little shack and says, that's where I grew up. Then there's where Dr. Spinogens grew up. There's where Dr. Straussy grew up. There's where Dr. So-and-so grew up. Yeah, it just really hit me. What a wonderful story. All these people came from all around the world, not speaking each other's language, let alone English, became doctors, lawyers, businessmen and women, military heroes, athletic directors, sports athletes. And it just really was a great story I wanted to share. However, I'm not a biographer. So I did go forward. I interviewed a lot of the families, I should say. I ran some surveys on the families. And the overarching theme, my overarching thought was, adversity made them who they were. Wow. They didn't come from, great things. They faced a lot of obstacles. They faced a lot of difficulties, but a common thread denominator was the adversity that they faced. And that's why, through my interest in it, that came about. And that is how the title of the book became In Defense of Adversity, meaning adversity is a good thing. It's meant to be put in our lives, ultimately, in my belief, to help us grow, transform, and evolve into the people we were meant to be.
Well, and what really caught my eyes when you talked about the participation trophies, and we raised three sons, and and I'm married to a former professional athlete. you know, you don't need participation trophies. You need to excel at what you're doing and work hard at you're
That's
doing.
right.
And it's nice to have the acclimates and, all of that encouragement.
Yeah.
But, you have these lined up and, you just, right now I have granddaughters and they're in dance. And, how many trophies do you need? So
Yeah.
you want to be able to really excel and commend for true artistry and for improvement. That's very
right.
important. I think that's extremely important. So, but you talk about some overarching key points. I talk about like the big idea, especially of books. And we're not just talking about a book today. We're talking about your messaging. But you say creating, I like your overall messaging of creating a home, your foundation, and the solid ground to effectively maneuver through life. A lot of people have a hard time maneuvering through life because they're used to having, especially when you get some of these different generations coming through. Like how do they, you have one bad review on social media and it destroys their whole day, their whole week. So how do you see this playing out, and how can people kind of combat that, either as parents, grandparents, or even in mid-career, halftime? I mean, where we are in our own lives as we're reinventing ourselves.
Yeah, I think, two themes I talk about in my book are two words, I should say, are acceptance and acknowledgement. What I mean by that is accepting that life is difficult. There's a great book by Scott Peck. I think it's called The Road Less Traveled. And he starts off, there's a long quote about life is difficult. I think that's the first sentence. Once you've accepted this fact, that fear goes away. And I think that's important. Accepting that adversity is a part of a life, and then acknowledging. So acceptance, acknowledgement. So accepting that adversity is a part of life and acknowledging that it's placed on our path to help us grow, transform, and evolve into the people we were meant to become. Right. That simple word of acceptance allows us to not be taken aback or surprised when a setback happens. If we accept that, hey, this is a part of life, we're not surprised by it, then our brain can stay rational thinking, and we can see the potential upside or the solution or the steps that we may need to solve this. So I think, raising people's awareness of accepting life's not fair, life's difficult. And I think, to quote one of my clients, they use an acronym in their throughout their company called, they say, we are in a VUCA world. VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So if we accept that this is the world, we're not surprised when ambiguity hits, or it's volatile, or it's complex. We're accepting that's life. And what are we going to do about that? Acknowledging that, hey, this is a chance for us to grow. This is a chance for us to overcome. This is a chance for us to beat our competition. This is a chance for us to become stronger. A simple metaphor is weightlifting or running. You become a better runner running into the wind, not with the wind. You build muscle through, moving something that's heavier. It's a resistance. And I think Mother Nature is giving us clues to life as well, too. If we accept that this is going to happen, acknowledge that we can grow from it, we will. And that's really important.
I love that illustration too. And especially it hits home with weight-bearing exercises. If you are especially, I've been told by now my doctor that I need to start, building up, especially with bone mass. And as we get older, we lose bone mass and you have to build that up. Well, weight-bearing exercises, it's not that much fun to have, but it builds the bone mass, it builds the strength, and it's something that we all need to do. And it's exactly what adversity does with, having to, what's the song? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I love that song. And I wrote a song called The Hero Inside as well. It's all about that, about facing what we need to face, because we have everything inside of us to be able to overcome that and to be able
That's
to
right.
be successful through that.
That's right.
It's a decision. It's a mental decision.
Well, and I tell people, put yourself in uncomfortable places as well to learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. I do something called Muay Thai. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's basically Thai, the national sport in Thailand. It's kickboxing, a form of kickboxing. And one of the things I do sparring with my coach. I have two coaches I work with, and I do sparring. We actually do sparring, and I tell them to get me tired and put pressure on me, because I want to be able to stay calm despite being exhausted and being pressured by them. If I can stay calm and calm, cool, collected, I'm going to rely on all the skills that they taught me. I'm not going to panic and get scared. I'm going to be calm in there and remember, if I see this happens, or if I see, so under this duress, under this chaos, you can actually think really clearly and fall back on lessons. So, it's not just those things that happen to us. I subscribe to the fact, put yourself on uncomfortable situations, especially if that is an area where you want to grow, and that's where you will grow. If you're a leader and you're an introvert and you have to speak in front of people, go to some classes and practice, putting yourself in that situation, so you know what it feels like, and you can stay calm, cool. You'll learn how to think clearly and stay calm, cool, and collected. But adversity's put there for a reason. It's not, everything good is not always meant to be comfortable. Oftentimes those uncomfortable things means, there's a chance, a lesson, there's a chance to grow, so
it really is.
Key.
What a great point. And putting that pressure on, and it's a lot of a life principle there too, because there's a lot of things in life that puts, the pressure on. I mean, even being able to find the diamond in a piece of coal.
That's right.
There's a lot of life principles that just happen, that we can see as in nature, even, and how important that principle is. It's very, very relevant. Yeah, very, very relevant. So
I use that metaphor, that quote, at the end of a lot of my workshops, especially around leadership. A diamond, I can't remember it exactly, but a diamond ultimately becomes a diamond. It's once a piece of coal, and it becomes a diamond through years of pressure and friction. So that, to your point, that's Mother Nature's way of saying pressure, friction, adversity can help us become, metaphorically, from a ugly piece of coal into this beautiful diamond, a sparkling diamond. So
yeah, I love outside. I would be a garden girl outside, all the time. But we can see in nature how plants push up, and we can see with animals and with growth, and you see this in birth. I mean, you see it in every part of nature. That's a really important point. Well, let's kind of move on to a little bit of this brain functionality. We're not going to get real deep here, but the brain science, I've done a bit of research on this and really enjoy how marvelous our brain is. But we've got there's a couple principles that you mentioned about in your book with the freeze, flight, and fight. If I can say that correctly. Oh my gosh, say that 10 times. But can you explain that a little bit? Because I think that'll really help listeners on how to respond to when adversity just hits them all of a sudden.
That's right. And I learned this whole thing about the brain functionality, two parts important. And to your point, the brain is a very complex organ, but I'm simplifying things to really basic level here. But I learned this philosophy, or this brain science process or insight, from one of my former kickboxing coaches. He was a former Marine, SWAT team leader on the Indiana police force, undefeated kickboxer, but he learned about this science behind the brain and taught it to the SWAT team leaders on a police force. He teaches it to fighters, and essentially it's about how to remain calm during adverse situations, and so you can fall back on your training, whether you're a police officer, whether you're a military person, whether you're a kickboxer, to fall back, stay calm under chaos, and fall back on what you've learned, the skills. So with that said, he talks, or I've learned about two important parts of the brain. The first being kind of what you mentioned, our emotional brain. That's known as the limbic system.
Right.
The limbic system does not grow, transform, or evolve through time. It's what we're born with. When we're functioning in the limbic system, our response to an adverse situation is going to be emotional, freeze, fight, or flight, or maybe a combination of those. Again, that does not grow, transform, and evolve through time. So when we're in an adverse situation, if we're stuck in our limbic part of our brain, we're going to respond with freeze, fight, or flight, or some combination. I am a freezer fighter, and that's not a good place to be, I've learned. And I can expand on that more if you want to. But the other part of the brain is called our cortex, and that's known as our rational brain. That does grow, transform, and evolve through time, through our life lessons, good and I think especially bad, through our education system, reading, writing, arithmetic, through our training and development. That's why I'm such a proponent of what I do, training and development in people. Because if you're not trained in certain skill sets, when they happen in the workplace, you're going potentially to fall into freeze, fight, or flight, and that's not what you want to do.
Right.
So life experiences, anything that provides you an opportunity to learn and hardwire your brain as a lesson. So when something happens, you're functioning in the rational part of your brain versus the limbic freeze, fight, and flight part of your brain. And that's a lot of what I talk about in my book, In Defense of Adversity, is learning about brain functionality, becoming more aware of triggers and responses for you that may put you into that limbic state. And what does it feel like? So you're more able to self-manage that and don't allow that to happen in the first place, to fall back rationally, to fall back, hey, this is a new thing, it's happening. What can we learn from it? Or we've been here before. Remember that happened? We handled it this way then? Let's do it this way now. Or I'm trained to handle this. That's what our training's about. Fall back on it. Or our policies and procedures say when this happens, do this. So there's many ways we can fall back into that cortex, but we've got to be functioning in that part of our brain in order for us to find what those options for resolution solution are. Does that make sense? Is that
yes, it's wonderful because it's really a part of your training, and I see that on your website. And we'll get to that later. But I see also when you mention triggers, it's so important. I talk a lot about habits and how important habits are, and exact repetition, and with training and with creating a new response. A lot of times that is within an exact repetition and a habit that's created over time. This has happened in my training as a concert pianist. I mean, you just over and over some of those exercises and technique. And then to perform, it's just like nothing. It's there.
Exactly.
And athletics are the same way. It's and the response of a Navy SEAL is the same way.
Exactly.
How to respond that way. So I think those are great points, and understanding the science behind that with the brain and how the brain is trained, and how important it is to let it be trained and not be afraid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's two parts of that: is mastering the skill set,
right,
over and over, like you're saying,
right.
But then you practice, or you practice in front of people. So you're taking the skill set, building that muscle memory, then you're applying that muscle memory in real world environments. And I'll go back to my sparring situation. Because I don't just go spar and tell coach put me under pressure. This is after practice, after throwing jab cross, throwing blocking, doing all these things over and over, this repetition. Now I'm practicing all those fundamentals in a real world chaotic environment. And that's the same thing in workshops that I do. If it's hypothetically a sales workshop, and there's 4 steps to become a good salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
We'll work those 4 steps over and over and over so people master them. Then we'll do role play or case studies relevant to the world that that company is involved in. So they're practicing these fundamental skills in real life situations. So that's when you build that, really strengthen that cortex, and you strengthen that space in between stimulus and response, and people can have real breakthrough and real success.
That's wonderful. And you're creating an environment to be able to do that. Exactly. And this is why it's important, even organizations like the Toastmasters or the other, and I grew up competing a lot. And it's why you're put into those situations to, it's a good practice. That's where you learn what works and what doesn't. And, when you get it in front of people, or you get it in front of, even relationships or sales in front of people, all of a sudden you go, okay, now I get it. Or, and it becomes a little, may not always become like totally smooth, but it's going to become more natural and a little bit more, doesn't feel quite so foreign to you. So that's great to be able to have a place to be able to do that. And I know there's lots of programs. So I think that's great. People will be able to check that out. Now you use various assessments, and I'm all for assessments. You use the DISC quite a bit, which is that DISC, if you're not familiar with that. A lot of people use that. So let's explain a little bit. I use in my Hero Mountain Summit course, I have people also take the assessment. I have a separate assessment, but also the Gallup assessments. So it kind of talks about skills and about your, your core competency. That's what I focus on. But let's talk about how you have found how assessments, if I can say that correctly today, my goodness.
Say 3 times.
I know. All of these, we had the freeze, flight, fight. Now we have assessments.
I know. But can you?
Oh my goodness. But can you expand on that just a little bit and how it can help a lot of our listeners? Because, I mean, who wants to take another test, or who wants to, go through all of this? So, and you have different, in your book, you have chapters on each one of these, and there's a lot of resources about this. But why do you use this particular one? And what good have you seen? How has it helped people that you are able to, especially when we're talking about adversity?
Right. There's 2 parts of this. One will be EQ based, and one will be emotional triggers and response based. And I'll connect those 2. So I think the number one thing I like doing is helping people build their emotional intelligence. I think I'm not sure if your listeners know what that is, but it's, we know IQ is how smart people are, EQ is how astute we are at our emotions.
Right. So
when I talk EQ, I talk 3 things. 1, building your intrapersonal skills, that's self-knowledge. Then secondly would be building your interpersonal skills, knowing others. And thirdly is situational awareness, knowing how myself and those others are going to function effectively under real world environments.
Right.
So all 3 of those I apply DISC to. So DISC, for your listeners, is an acronym for 4 behavior styles. D stands for dominance, I stands for influence, S stands for stimulus, C stands for compliance. Each one of those is going to give you basic information on how each of those styles manifests behavior, communication, decision making, dealing with adversity, dealing with conflict, dealing with change, risk, and conflict, and decision making. So I like using DISC to help people understand themselves first, raise that intrapersonal skill side, understanding myself better. How do I make decisions? How do I face adversity? How do I communicate? How do I deal with change, risk, and conflict? Because the more I can understand myself, the more effective I'm going to be. Then if I can, so I help them understand themselves first, then people with whom they engage with, whether it's their team, colleagues, or customers, I help them understand the DISC style of others, same attributes, decision-making, communication, behavior. So I can better understand them and we can engage better. We can get along better. So if I'm a type A personality, and I'm always on the go, always love change. I'm a very aggressive, but people I'm dealing with are a little bit more introverted, a little more shy. If I don't realize that dynamic, I can turn them off, or I'm not going to get the best results. If I understand myself, hey, I tend to be a type A personality.
Yeah.
These people aren't there yet. What do I need to do to engage with them the best, whether it's a customer, a colleague relationship or a leadership role? So that's interpersonal in concert together. Then how do we all function under real world environment, change, conflict, real life situations? So do we all stay in that rational state of mind? Do I stay in a rational state of mind as a leader? Do my people stay in a rational state of mind because I'm keeping them there? And do we all keep in a rational state of mind while all this craziness is going on? So I use DISC to raise EQ, inter, and situational awareness, all those three. And then I also use DISC when I talk about those emotional triggers and responses, because each DISC style has different things that may trigger them, and obviously different responses. So through the research of my book, I've really made the connection between freeze, fight, and flight and the 4 DISC styles. So dominant styles, high Ds, these are type A personalities. When they're under duress in that limbic state, they're fighters. Boom, they're going to fight back or going to push back. Influencers are flighters. They don't want confrontation. They don't want to deal with it, act like it's not happening. Steadiness styles are freezers, and compliance styles are freezer fighters. And when you take the DISC assessment, you're not necessarily D or I or S or C.
You can be a combination.
Exactly. I'm an SD blend. And so remember, S's are freezers, D's are fighters. When I was researching my book, I'm like, oh my God, this is me. There's things that can trigger me. And it's true. I freeze, I shut down, I internalize things. But when I'm pushed too hard, Italian Steve comes out, the fighter.
There you go.
And as you can see, that's not a good place to be. I've been in stressful situations and people are like, they'll play on the name Eve and Steve, and nothing bothers you. Little do they know, down underneath, I'm seething. I'm not in agreement. So I've learned to better master my triggers. I'm much more aware of my triggers and my response, so I don't allow myself to fall into freeze, fight, or flight anymore. And I teach my clients to do that too. But this is key because when you are angry, if you fall into that limbic state of anger or freeze, depending on the breadth and depth of that situation, you may not easily get out of that. You may not, when you're mad, you can't necessarily get unmad. When you're internalizing everything, you can't get out of that right away.
It's hard. It builds.
Well, in that little time span, you might make a wrong decision. You might say the wrong thing that you regret later. You won't, be able to think clearly. So it's imperative that we raise our EQs and we're much more aware of our triggers and responses. So between stimulus and response, we're optimizing results, if that makes sense.
And I think it's really important. I did a podcast with my husband. My husband comes on with me once a month. I drag him in my studio, and we do. We've been married for a long time, and we did one podcast called "When a Type A Marries a Type B," and I'm a Type A. He is a Type B. And I knew this, didn't totally realize the total implications of this when we got married, but through the years, and we've realized how that complements each other, but also how we are different in our responses. And so, I think we can analyze, but when we get down to it, you understand, why am I responding this way? And some of these assessments helps us understand that. And I think that's,
no doubt about it.
That's that emotional intelligence and to be able to, and also validate, because a lot of people, I do what I do because I have seen so many that just sort of quit at this point of their life. And they're sitting on skills, sitting on all of this experience and resources, and they're just not able to move. And well, what do I do next? I don't know. I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to sit here. So they're just sitting on that, but they don't realize how much they really have to give. And our world, our world really needs that. And so some of these assessments are very valuable in affirming where we are and what we have to give and what, and I read all the time. I was reading, some of these organizations, very successful people that have now put their heart and soul into helping others at this point of their life. That's wonderful. Takes a lot to do that, and foregoing some other things, but it's a wonderful thing and a way to give back. And part of that is understanding your personality and understanding the people to surround yourself with and being okay with that. So,
I talk one of the big words out now is diversity. I like talking about diversity of the team from a behavioral perspective.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
And I don't care what you listen. I use DISC because I like it the best. I'm also certified Myers-Briggs. There's a lot of other good ones. I'm not saying that. But anything you can understand the strengths, opportunity areas of the team and what each DISC style, in my instance, because that's what I use. What do each of these DISC styles bring to the table? Well, one might make fast, good decisions on facts. The other person may slow us down so we're not making too fast decisions. Another person can be a champion for the process. Another person can be the methodical one that takes a step back and helps us slow down. So the blend of a nice team, the diverse team, I like diversity for that. I speak to that a lot. What does our team DISC styles bring to the table if we're working in concert together? So
there's so much to that because people are so different in their styles and in their work habits even. And, some people are early, some people, it's just a lot of meanings to that word. And I think it's gotten tossed around in a whole other way. Well, let's talk about, you've written, I've written a number of books and you have as well. But you're coming out with another one and it's Thrive in the Face of Adversity. Now, why write another book on adversity? Because you've already written one that's pretty thorough and it's 300 sage insights. But what I'm thinking is it gives people something to hang their hat on and to be able to immediately apply. Is that kind of what that's all about? Why you're writing another book?
Yeah, well, it's a sin I took so long to write this book, but I'll explain that in a bit. The tagline, as you were saying, you were getting into is 300 sage insights for facing, overcoming, and learning from life's obstacles.
Yes.
So part of my book, In Defense of Adversity, that's my second book. I interviewed or surveyed over 60 people across 6 different questions. Things like, how do you first face adversity? What do you learn from it when you overcome it? How do you overcome it? Who are role models in your life you admire that went through adversity? How do you prepare for it? So 6 questions. These people, they put their heart and soul into these answers. I have a PDF file about that thick.
Yeah, I bet.
Because I surveyed them and I interviewed some. But with my book, In Defense of Adversity, I couldn't put all their responses in that book. So to honor them, I took one of their insights, one of each participant's insights, and peppered them through the book. But that left the remaining insights unpublished. And it's a gold mine of information, and it's just unbelievable. So I sat on this not thinking, for years I would send a PDF, I'd go back to it, read them. I'm like, these are so good. Well, then all of a sudden it hit me. It's like, this book's almost already written. You had 60 people write this book for you. So essentially what it is, it's basically all their information, all their insights published in full. Now I wrote an intro chapter, and at the beginning of so I wrote an intro chapter, then 6 chapters dedicated to each of those questions and the people's responses. So I wrote an intro, an ending chapter, and in front of each of those chapters where they supplied their insights, I put like 3 or 4 chapters leading into it. And at the end of every chapter, there's exercises. So it's actually a living document for, the question of how do you face adversity when it first happens? You have 50 insights that are awesome. And then there's exercises behind that particular chapter focused on that question, which were the top 5 favorite for you, why, or how are you going to implement them in your life now? So that's what that book's about. It was actually a build off of In Defense of Adversity.
That's great. In fact, I hope that encourages a lot of listeners and those that are working on a book and thinking, oh, you know what? You might have a lot of it already. Just hire a very good editor, by the way. But also, I like the fact that you have application, and that in this book too, the one I have gone through, your defensive adversity, you have exercises, and I've put that in most of my books as well. The application, because the application is so very important to be able to apply to our lives. Well, so
one of the most.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say one of the biggest compliments I've had are people reaching out to me a couple of years later. They're like, you know what? I went back to your book.
Yes.
I figured I needed to read it again and go through these exercises again. That's probably the biggest compliment I've had on these books. So
yes, doesn't that mean a lot as an author?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like birthing another child when you have these books come out.
Indeed.
It's just, well, we're going to kind of wrap up today a little bit. This has been wonderful. And I love the podcast format because I get to meet people really all over the world. Exactly. And it's been wonderful to meet with you today. What is one takeaway? And then after we do this, I'll let you give your information, how to get a hold of you. But what is one takeaway that someone can apply just after listening today to all of this about emotional intelligence, about the brain, about adversity? What's one thing that they can apply immediately that won't be just too hard, but it's immediately applicable for them?
Yeah, going back to the whole thing about accepting that adversity is a part of life and that it is an opportunity for us to become better, again, to transform, grow, transform, and evolve into the people we were meant to become. Going back to, I said that at the beginning, I connected that and the emotional triggers and responses. Right. And then I talked about brain and a stimulus and response. If we accept that adversity is a part of life, it's going to keep us in that cortex part of our brain.
Right.
And when we're in that cortex part of the brain, that's when we're going to be able to see the opportunity or the growth. If we're not accepting that adversity is a part of life, when it happens, there's a chance we're going to be pushed into freeze, fight, or flight, and then we're in trouble. So that whole philosophy, connecting dots between accepting that adversity is a part of life and the importance of that in keeping us in a rational state of mind, I think is the biggest takeaway, because when we are in that rational state of mind, only then will we say the right things, solve problems, think creatively, make wise decisions, and so on and so forth. So
it's all about mindset. It's just about mindset. Definitely.
That's right.
Well, real quick, give us, this will all be in the show notes for those of you who are listening in. There's, I put out a newsletter, goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. Everything, all of your information will be in there. It will be in the podcast notes, in the video notes, everything. So, but tell us, for those who are just listening, how to reach you, just real quick, and how to get more information about what you do.
Yeah, my website, all my contact information is on there. The website is my last name, Gavatorta.com, Gavatorta.com. Go on there, all my contact information. I do coaching, consulting, workshops, speaking engagements, and a blend of all those, along with assessment capabilities as well, too. Feel free to Google me. That's a great way, too, because I have a lot of wonderful resources, podcasts like yours, a lot of video podcasts out there. Google me, go to my YouTube. I'm on social media. Follow me anywhere there, connect with me there, and go to my YouTube site. I have a ton of content up there, a lot of good insights, self-help, skill development, things of that nature. And again, just Google my name, Steve Gavatorta, hit YouTube, and bang, you can get a bunch of resources. And again, find access to me as well, too. So.
And you have a name that's easily searchable. When I had someone trying to search my name, Deborah Johnson, I said, well, there's a minimum of 8,000 of us. There's probably about like 100,000. You look for that name. So you have a unique name. So
you have to spell it right first, though. I've heard Gavatora. My God, I've heard all kinds of things. So,
well, the right spelling will be on the podcast, of course. Exactly. So, yes.
And keep in mind, I've published 3 books. I published 2. In Defense of Adversity is my current pride of joy.
Right.
Thrive in the Face of Adversity is coming out in May. Right. So keep your eyes open for that. Yep.
Good. Yeah, well, those links will be there, and I'm sure it'll be on your website. Perfect. So, Steve, thank you so much for joining us today. We've just had a wonderful time. And again, I love meeting people all over. And for those of you who have lasted all the way through this, I hope you have really enjoyed and that you get our articles and the updates. I don't spam people with my newsletter. It's not a high sales thing. It's basically letting you know all of the materials that are coming out, especially podcasts. And I've been taking more bonus podcasts this year. So goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. There's Deborah Johnson speaker and DJ Works music. I have a lot of material as well. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you, Steve, again, for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure. And for all of you listening, I will look forward to being with you again next time. So bye-bye for now. Thank you for joining us. It is because of our wonderful listeners like you that we keep going strong week after week. We'd love it if you'd share and follow us to not miss a single show and even write a review. You can also find all of our articles, products, and links at womenathalftime.com.